Hi, I'm Lauren Sonnenberg with LifeCore, and welcome to this week's episode of Mind Body Talk on chronic pain. So today, my goal is to help you gain a new understanding of tingling, sharp, stinging pain, often referred to as neuralgic pain or rheumatism. Now, if you've listened to some of my other videos, either here on my Facebook page, or if you caught some of the reruns on my YouTube channel, which is at LifeCore Wellness, then maybe you saw a little bit of a theme, or a couple of themes, but one thing I kept on referring to is we were talking about pain in the healing phase and using German new medicine terminology there. And I'll go into more detail because this might be the very first time you're seeing anything that I've spoken about. So I'll make sure to go into greater detail. But I kept on saying, okay, sometimes we have pain that doesn't start in the healing phase. Sometimes we have pain that starts in the conflict active phase. And so that's what we want to address today because it's a really important piece and it fits into the big picture if you're dealing with chronic pain, if you're new to it, or if you've experienced it for a while and still don't quite understand what's going on, because this information really is not out in the conventional medical world full on yet. It's beginning to, baby steps. So here we are. So let's talk about a little bit about German new medicine, just in case you're totally new to it. Hi, Kathy. Thanks for joining us here today. And so if you're totally new to it, the thing you need to know is that, I'll give you the same picture that we had last time. We have this, here we're going along, normal, everything's going along. And then here we have a conflict, okay, a conflict shock. And this is a biological conflict, or as I like to refer to it, a bio-emotional conflict. Now we're in this conflict active phase, and then we get into this conflict resolution phase, provided that we have resolution to our conflict. Now, a lot of times we have chronicity because people get stuck, either they aren't able to find conflict resolution for their conflict, or they're in this conflict healing or conflict resolution or healing phase, and they keep on getting looped back for any number of reasons. There are a lot of reasons why that can happen, including the original conflict being reactivated. But there are other reasons as well, which I've talked about in some of the other discussions. Now, so here with this, with the tingling, sharp, stinging pain, what we have is the involvement of the nerves in the periosteum. Now, the periosteum, for those of you who don't know, is the skin that covers over the bone, and it has a very sensitive network of nerves within it. It comes from the ectodermal layer of the body. This stems from embryology, so there's 3 different layers of the body. So now, the periosteum, that's over the bone. The lower layer, the one that's closest to the bone, will register the swelling that is happening when a bone is in a healing phase. Okay, so that's something else, okay? Now, the upper layer of it generates rheumatic pain, which is what we're talking about today. And it's not like you can't actually have both at the same time. We'll get to that later on. But today we're talking specifically about this rheumatic pain that happens in that upper layer of the periosteum. Now, bear with me. I am looking at my notes because there's a lot of technical information with all of this. So, and I want to make sure I'm giving it to you as correct as possible. So, bear with me a little bit. So, we have these 2 phases, and it starts off with this conflict shock that I showed you in the picture. Now, what is the conflict shock related to the periosteal nerves? So what we have here, now with the epidermal skin, we have separation conflicts, but with this, the skin over the bone, we have a more severe separation conflict that we're dealing with. This is a severe or intense, sometimes even described as brutal or cruel. So let's give a few examples. Okay. If your arms are involved, it might have to do with not being able to hold a loved one. Now, this can happen on the epidermal layer too, which is a different issue. You see rashes. Okay. But if it's something deeper, more intense, I should say, of a higher grade level, then not being able to hold on to a loved one, which could be a person or a pet, then we could be involving that part of the body, the periosteal nerves in the arms. Now, or arm. The hands, someone slipped away. That could be obviously not just literally, but figuratively. They've gone out of my life. There's a breakup, geographic separation, could be a death. Lots of things can happen there. Now, legs and ankles. Wanting to push someone away. It could be not being able to hold them as well, but with the legs and the ankles, not so much. And then with the feet, it's separation from familiar ground, especially when there's an unexpected move. Okay. Now, what we see with separation conflicts, whether they're of the epidermal nature or something more intense, like we're talking about here with the periosteal nerves involved, is could be either not wanting to separate from the person or wanting to. As you can imagine, if someone has gone through a very traumatic incident where maybe there's some abuse, maybe physical or sexual abuse, this could really, this could be involved here. Not surprisingly at all, this could definitely be involved, but it doesn't have to be of quite that extreme nature, but it has to be interpreted as a very intense emotional experience. So not everybody who goes through these things, and everybody who has a breakup will experience this, but if you do experience it this way, it makes perfect sense that you could be in this cycle. So if you start to see these symptoms we're going to talk about, you'll say, oh, I'm beginning to get it. And like we talk about, say in the chronic pain, mind, body empowerment group that I have, it's a free group that I have, we talk about the power of knowing what's going on, even though you might not like the experience of the symptoms. Of course you don't, they're not fun, but if you know they're coming, that's one of the most powerful components of German new medicine is you know what to expect. Even if it hasn't come yet, oh, this is when this is going to happen, and this is when that's going to happen. And although we don't want to experience unpleasant sensations, if we know they're coming, it takes away some of the panic. It takes away the, oh my goodness, I think I'm getting worse, when in fact many of the signs are signs that we're getting better. Or in this conflict active phase, we haven't resolved the conflict yet, but as we see these symptoms we're going to talk about, at least we can say, oh, I knew that was going to happen. Or it makes sense, even if you didn't know before and you're just finding this video, we say, oh, wow, that makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about those symptoms. Any questions so far? I'll just keep an eye here just to see. Okay. Now, in this, I'll give you a little visual here again. In this conflict active phase, okay, this is the cold phase, what we experience when we have this intense or severe separation conflict is hypersensitivity in that area of the body. And so if you're touching it, there'll be it'll be more hypersensitive. That's redundant. It'll be more sensitive. So, and we'll also experience short-term memory loss. And why is that? There's a function for this. There's always a function. Everything in German new medicine has a function related to it. So the function is, if I can, for a short term, forget the intensity of this trauma or have it at least downgraded on some level, block the memory, I'm going to be better able to deal with this traumatic experience. And it doesn't even have to be capital T trauma, but it has to be intense on some levels. So, I mean, you're getting into the medium T to capital T area. Now, this is where we see the tingling, sharp, stinging pain, neuralgic pain, could be deemed rheumatism. Okay. It's a colder pain. It's not like a hot pain that you would experience with fibromyalgia. That's a separate conflict. It's a self-evaluation conflict in healing, okay? And now, whether you're experiencing this on the right or left-hand side of the body has to do with handedness. So if you're right hand dominant, like you clap and your right hand's on top, and you're probably seeing this in reverse because of the way this whole video is set up, but then you're right hand dominant. If your left hand's on top, then when you clap, you're left hand dominant, and it doesn't always match up exactly with what hand you write with. So for a right-handed person, things that are happening on the left-hand side have to do with mother or child, and the other side, did I say that correctly? Right-handed person, the left-hand side has to do with mother and child. I think I did say it right, but I just want to make sure. And the right-hand side has to do with everybody else. So it's flipped for left-hand dominant people. Now, what's an exception to that rule? If you have like a literal, somebody grabs you by the left arm, that will be a localized conflict, and therefore that area is the part that's going to be involved, whether it doesn't matter about the left or right handedness, like your dominant hand in that part. So now we could also see here trigeminal neuralgia, because we can have an intense separation conflict related to loss of cheek contact or a literal or figurative slap in the face. Okay, so now what else can we see here? Capillaries can become narrow, causing restricted blood circulation. The scientific explanation of this, I'll give you the website, the German New Medicine website. I'll put that in here. I didn't include it before I forgot, but I'm going to put that in, and you can reference it there because I want you to have all the information possible. But that's a very complicated explanation, so we're just going to not go deeper than this right now. But when we have that narrowing of the capillaries, the affected areas of the body, if we're talking about extremities like fingertips that are involved, can turn white. We know this as Raynaud's disease. So if somebody's constantly having that happen, we know that that person needs to be able to address the emotional or psychological aspects of that intense separation conflict that they're undergoing. That would be right up there in terms of what needs to be done outside of what they're going to do in the conventional medical world to attend to it. So we also see this when there's phantom pain. If there's been an amputation for people and the pain continues on, it's because the conflict is still active, which is just pretty profound information. Okay, now let's talk about what happens in this healing phase. We go from that hypersensitivity to this hyposensitivity or loss of sensitivity. You're going to see numbness at that point. Okay. Now you're also going to, here, I'm going to give you the picture here. So here, conflict resolution. And we're talking about this part, the first part, they call this PCLA, and this part over here is PCLB, post-conflictolysis, so post-conflict. This is part A, and this is the epicrisis or epileptoid crisis. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. But in this first portion here, we have the continuation. From here, we had some short-term memory loss, and it continues into this portion. Okay. Now we go into the epicrisis. Okay. Here, a couple of things happen. You can have some troubled circulation. You can have dizziness. You can have loss of consciousness, either of a more mild nature or something more extreme. So it could be fainting or total loss of consciousness. Okay. And you're also going to see here a drop in blood sugar. Okay. And a return of the rheumatic pain we had here. So here, we weren't so much experiencing the rheumatic pain, but here it comes back up. And you're going to see this more intensely at night. Okay. And then what happens in this PCLB phase is things start to normalize. Things start to fade out. the memory comes back, the numbness normalizes, sensitivity level normalizes, pain is going to be going away. Okay. So, that's what we have there. Now, any questions on that so far? Because I know that is a lot of information if you're hearing it, especially for the first time. It's just a lot going on with all of that. And especially if you're brand new to German new medicine, it's like, whoa, I might have to watch this a couple of times. And I get it. Believe me, I get it. And I've known about German new medicine for, I think, about 10 years. And it's still like, it's a lot of information to process, but it makes so much sense. So don't feel bad if you have to look at the video a couple of times, because the more you're exposed to it, the easier it is to recall and say, oh, yes, this is what's happening. And okay. So now let's talk about one other thing that can happen here. What we have is different than rheumatoid arthritis. Okay. But it gets the name because there is some similarity. Remember, we talked about that lower level of the periosteum that's involved when we have a healing phase of a self-devaluation conflict. So let me give you a visual. When we have, and remember this is a different conflict, when we have arthritis, it's happening here in the healing phase, making the body stronger in that area. And you have the swelling. There's edema, there's swelling around the bone, therefore it stretches the periosteum over the bone. Okay, so you have a rheumatic experience there. Now, what happens if you have that? Well, that would come, a lot of times it would come second, but it could be there first. So, but what happens if you have that going on at the same time and a new conflict comes in, you have an intense separation conflict, and you have this rheumatic pain that involves the upper layer of the periosteum, while you're at the same time going through a different conflict in resolution that has rheumatic-like pain involving the lower level of the periosteum. That's kind of like double rheumatism, essentially. Now, obviously very painful. And what we call that in German new medicine is the bone syndrome. Okay, so there's more, but that's the general gist of all of this. And so ask questions. I mean, obviously you might not have them yet right now, but if you see this later on and you have questions that come up, by all means, feel free to put them in the comments or to message me. And like I said, I'll put the GNM link to the periosteal or periosteum page, and you can look at all the finer details there. And so, well, thank you once again for joining me. And this was really a nice time. And I will look forward to seeing you next week. Now, if you want to continue the discussion, if you have chronic pain, by all means, feel free to join my free group. It's the Chronic Pain Mind Body Empowerment Group. And it's like a support group meets an informational knowledge group. And we just try to empower people with information. So you can put out your concerns and get support, but also get the pieces of information you need in order to see your experience in a new light. Because we're all about helping people move beyond chronic pain. So thank you once again, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.